First story. We lost our baby girl, and I cried in front of my wife. And she said I don't have the right to grieve, accused me of making my angel's death about me, and then said how I should be the man and support her. My wife and I have been together 6 years and married too. We have always wanted kids, but wanted to wait and not rush at the start of our marriage. The pregnancy came as a surprise, but a very welcomed and happy one. Everything went smoothly throughout the pregnancy. There were never any signs of issues. We decorated the nursery together and put up the furniture. We were so excited to meet our baby and be parents. She carried to term, and the day of the birth, again, things were okay. She gave birth, and we didn't hear any crying. We were so confused, and you can see it in the doctor's eyes that they were very concerned. I can't begin to explain the heartbreak when we were told that our little girl didn't make it. We were able to hold her, and she was so beautiful. A funeral home has a free funeral service for little angels, so we buried ours, just the two of us. I have never seen a casket so small. I have been trying to be strong for my wife. I only cry when she's not around, so when she needs me, I'm there. It's been hard to stay strong when she's crying in my arms. Seeing her like this adds to the pain. Last night, I couldn't hold it in and started bawling with her. She didn't like that at all. She started saying that I was trying to make it about me, how I should be the man and support her. She also said that I don't have the right to be so upset because I wasn't the one carrying her and giving birth. She went to bed and left me there. I know she has it worse than me because she carried our angel and gave birth to her. I just didn't expect her to react that way. But I lost my daughter too. I wanted to be a father. I didn't get to change her diaper for the first time and spend my first sleepless night with her crying. I lost her too. I know that my wife is hurting, which is why she's reacting that way. How do I support her better, but also let her know how I feel in a way that doesn't seem like I'm taking away from her? Comments. Suspended resolution. Your wife is toxic. You loved and lost a child too. Of course you're going to be heartbroken by this situation. It's because of people like your wife that guys just snap one day. Because to people like her, men don't have, nor have any right to, human emotions. I'm sorry for your loss. OP, you need to talk to your wife about therapy, both separate and individual. I hope for your sake she sees the error in how she acknowledges your emotions going forward. Deleted. You have seen firsthand now what it's like to witness an instant loss of attraction. The same thing would have happened if it had been your cat that died instead of your child. You have every right to grieve as much as your wife does. However, your wife now thinks you're weak. While it's stupid to think showing emotion would be viewed as weakness, nevertheless many women believe it so. Basically, you are no longer your wife's rock that she can hang off of like an emotional tampon. You are no longer the strong, fatherly type she expects will shoulder all her tears and is seemingly invulnerable to pain. It's a very warped expectation from women who believe this. Update. TLDR at the bottom. Sorry, it's pretty long. I want to first of all say thank you for the help and advice. I tried reading as many comments as I could. It's a lot to get through, and I appreciate the help. I read a few comments that sort of blamed me for my wife's reaction and assumed that I treated her pregnancy and the birth as if it wasn't a big deal. I'm not sure where I implied that. When I say that the pregnancy went smoothly, I mean that the doctors never found any medical problems and that both of my girls were healthy. I have never once and never will dismiss that experience. If I treated everything she went through like it wasn't a big deal, I wouldn't even be here asking how I can make things better for her. I also never even equated our pain. I believe what I wrote is, I know she has it worse than me because she carried our angel and gave birth to her. And I know that my wife is hurting, which is why she's reacting that way. How do I support her better, but also let her know how I feel in a way that doesn't seem like I'm taking away from her? I'm not sure where I equated our pain. If anything, I am diminishing my own pain in order to support her, or at least I tried to. Even after what she said, I wasn't mad at her. I was hurt, but I wasn't mad. I know she said it out of pain. It still hurts. I didn't need to read that I'm a piece of tht husband that doesn't care for my wife, because I'm also grieving the loss of our daughter. I see her every day. I see the pain that she is in. I hear it. I can't begin to imagine it, and I never will be able to understand it. I know that what she is going through is worlds different than me. If I could take all her pain and put it on me, believe me, I would. No question. What I also didn't need to read is how my wife is evil and other countless mean words. That wasn't the point of my post. It wasn't to boost my ego and to bash my wife. It's incredibly rude and unhelpful in every way. I asked a question because I was at a loss and didn't know how to proceed. My wife isn't a bad person at all. She's an amazing woman, and she honestly deserves the world. She doesn't deserve this at all. Thank you to those of you who acknowledged what she said, but also didn't speak ill of her. It doesn't make me feel any better having people say those things about her. She's not abusive or a monster. It made me sick reading those comments. It's upsetting that I even have to say this. But it's the internet. I get that. Apologies for the rant. I just wanted to let off some steam. I've always felt the need to be Superman. When I was 16, I lost my father, and it was extremely hard on my mother and me. I had to be her rock then, or I would have lost her too. This caused me to act out in ways people would call evil to others around me. I've lost friends because of that. I held it in at home for my mom, and it came out in an ugly way. I can understand why my wife is reacting this way, and I'm not going to leave her over this. I wasn't planning on it. I want to be there for her, but I don't think I can be there for her the way I have been. I can't carry the weight of both our pains on my shoulders anymore. I'm barely holding on right now. I feel like I'm in a speeding car with no steering wheel or brakes. I haven't mentioned anything to my wife about her comments, and I don't think I will right now. I'll be looking into some counseling dealing with this type of situation. I also want to look into some counseling for PPD for my wife. I've heard stories of how heartbreaking it could be when it isn't taken seriously. I don't even want to imagine it. I hope we find the help we both need, and that we can come together eventually. Our friends and family have been by her side as well. They call and text her often. Her mom and sister come over too. I'm happy that she is getting extra support. I wish I were doing more for her myself. It didn't occur to me how me crying in her presence could make her feel worse. I feel guilty now, like I'm failing her. It would be nice to get a check-in from our loved ones once in a while. But she needs it more, so it's okay. I want her to get the most help. I'll use the counseling. As stupid as it may sound, having strangers tell me that it's okay to cry made me tear up a bit. The only person in my life who has told me that is my father. Whenever I would get hurt as a kid, instead of telling me not to cry, he'd say that it's okay to do so. He's the type of man and father I aspire to be. Hopefully, with the outside help, I will be stronger for my wife. Thanks again. I love my wife, and I want us to get through this and come out stronger together. I love my daughter, and she will forever be my firstborn. TLDR. I will be looking into counseling for my wife and me. Comments. Deleted. She is terrible to say that to you. People often break up when there's a matter of infidelity. But sometimes a breakup should be considered in cases like this, where something atrociously hurtful is said. She wants to grieve by herself and doesn't consider your feelings. Deleted. Your family should support you too. Stop being Superman again, and be honest that you're hurting too. They don't get to dictate how you feel. None of them do. Not even your wife. Second story. I announced we are having a baby, and my entitled parents demand we abort the pregnancy because it's unfair for my sister that I have a baby first, and we are not married yet. They even accused my girlfriend of cheating. Then my sister showed up at my house, demanding we give her our baby, saying she is infertile and lied to our parents all this time. So, I 25 recently found out that my girlfriend 24F is pregnant. It wasn't planned, but honestly, it feels like one of the best things that's ever happened to me. We've been together for 3 years, and while we're not married yet, we've talked about building a future together. This baby feels like the start of that. My girlfriend was a little nervous at first. This is a big step, after all, but she's on board. And we've been making plans to get everything ready for our little one. Since this is our first child, I wanted to share the news with my family. I grew up in a pretty traditional household, so I knew there might be a few raised eyebrows since we're not married yet. But I figured, hey, a baby is a blessing, right? I wasn't expecting them to jump for joy, but I thought they'd at least be supportive. Boy, was I wrong. When I told my parents, their faces immediately twisted like I'd just told them I'd burned down their house or something. My mom was the first to speak, and her exact words were, "You need to get rid of it." I honestly thought I misheard her. I just kind of froze for a second, and then I said, "What? Why would we do that? We're keeping the baby." That's when my dad chimed in. He said, "It's not fair to your sister. You know she's been trying for years to have a baby, and now you go and get your girlfriend pregnant out of wedlock. Do you even know if it's yours?" I was stunned. Completely and utterly stunned. First of all, my older sister 28F, and I don't have a great relationship. She's always been the golden child in my parents' eyes, perfect daughter, married to a guy my parents absolutely adore. Meanwhile, I've always been the one who couldn't do anything right in their eyes. I moved out at 18 because I was tired of feeling like I didn't belong. But I stayed in the same town to stay close to my younger sister 20F, who I get along with really well. I know my sister and her husband have been struggling with infertility, and I feel for her, I really do. But how the hell is my child's existence unfair to her? It's not like I got my girlfriend pregnant just to spite her. And then there's the cheating accusation. That really pissed me off. My girlfriend has never given me any reason to doubt her loyalty, and the fact that my parents would throw that out there with no evidence just shows how little respect they have for me and her. I told them flat out that the baby is mine, and I'm going to be a father whether they like it or not. That's when my mom started crying, saying I was being selfish and disrespectful to the family. She said I should have thought about how this would affect the family before putting my girlfriend in that position. My dad just sat there shaking his head and muttering about how we raised you better than this. At that point, I'd had enough. I told them that if they couldn't support me, then I didn't want them involved in my life or my child's life. Then I left. When I got home, I felt completely drained. My younger sister called me later that night and said she was happy for me and proud of me for standing up to our parents. She said she couldn't believe how cruel they were being and offered to help me and my girlfriend however she could. That really meant a lot to me, but it also made me realize just how messed up my family dynamic is. I haven't told my girlfriend about what happened yet. Part of me feels like I should. She has a right to know what kind of people my parents are. But another part of me wants to spare her the stress, at least for now. She's already dealing with the challenges of an unplanned pregnancy, and I don't want to add to her worries. At the same time, I'm worried my parents might try to take matters into their own hands. They know where I live, and while they've never shown up uninvited before, I wouldn't put it past them to do something drastic, like confronting my girlfriend directly. I'm torn about what to do. Should I tell my girlfriend the truth about what my parents said? Or should I just cut my parents off and give her a more neutral explanation for why they're not involved? And how do I protect her and our child if my parents decide to escalate things? Update. I thought my parents' reaction to the pregnancy was the worst of it, but I was wrong. It turns out, when you give toxic people an inch, they take a mile and then some. The very next day after my fight with my parents, my older sister and her husband showed up at my house unannounced. I didn't tell them about the pregnancy, so it was obvious my parents had called them immediately after our argument. I should have been prepared for something like this. When I opened the door, my sister looked like she was barely holding it together. She was flushed, her hands were shaking, and her husband stood behind her, staring me down with this mix of anger and impatience. Before I could even say a word, my sister barged past me into the house. "I need to talk to you. Now," she said. I could hear the tension in her voice, and it wasn't long before she spilled everything. Apparently, my sister had been struggling with infertility for years. While I'd known she and her husband were having trouble conceiving, I had no idea how bad it had gotten. She admitted that they'd gone through multiple failed IVF treatments, expensive procedures, and endless doctor's appointments, only to be told that she couldn't have kids naturally. She said she never told my parents the full extent of her infertility because she didn't want to hurt them or deal with their pity. That would have been enough to make me feel for her. But what came next completely erased any sympathy I might have had. She started telling me that since my girlfriend and I weren't married, and since the pregnancy was unplanned, it made perfect sense for us to give the baby to her and her husband. She said they were ready to be parents and that they'd always wanted kids, so why not help out the family by letting them raise the baby instead? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My girlfriend and I hadn't even had the chance to fully celebrate the pregnancy ourselves. And here was my sister trying to swoop in and take our child like it was a package she'd ordered online. She must have sensed my shock because she switched gears and started laying on the guilt. She told me that her husband was getting fed up with her inability to conceive and that their marriage was under strain because of it. She said his family, her in-laws, were pressuring them constantly to have a baby and were starting to treat her like a failure for not being able to give them a grandchild. She even said, "If I can't give him a baby, I don't know how much longer he'll stay with me. This could save my marriage." I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, stunned, as she kept going. She talked about how much this would mean to her, how she'd make sure the baby had everything they could ever want, and how she'd still let me and my girlfriend be part of the baby's life. She kept throwing around phrases like family sacrifice and what's best for everyone, as if that would somehow make me forget that she was asking me to give up my own child. Her husband, who had been silent up to this point, finally chimed in. He didn't even try to hide his anger. He told me that I was being selfish for refusing to consider their situation, and that I should man up and think about how much better off the baby would be with them. He even implied that we'd be doing the baby a favor by giving them up since we didn't have the same financial stability that he and my sister had. At this point, my girlfriend came out of the bedroom. She'd been resting after feeling nauseous that morning, but must have heard enough to figure out what was happening. She walked into the living room, took one look at my sister and her husband, and immediately asked, "What's going on?" Before I could explain, my sister jumped in and started repeating her pitch to my girlfriend, practically begging her to do the right thing and let them raise the baby. She even tried to play the sympathy card again, saying that my girlfriend was young and could always have more children later. I could see my girlfriend's expression shift from confusion to anger in an instant. She placed her hand on her stomach, looked my sister dead in the eye, and told her that there was no way in hell she was giving up her baby. She said she couldn't believe my sister had the audacity to even suggest such a thing, let alone show up at our house uninvited to guilt trip us. My sister tried to argue, saying that we weren't thinking clearly, and that she was just trying to make sure the baby had the best life possible. She said this was about doing what's right for the family, but my girlfriend cut her off. She told my sister to get out of our house and not to come back. At first, my sister refused to leave. She started crying and yelling, saying things like, "You're tearing this family apart," and "You'll regret this when the baby's born." Her husband tried to back her up, but my girlfriend wasn't having any of it. She told them that if they didn't leave immediately, she'd call the police. That finally did the trick. My sister stormed out, still crying, and her husband followed, glaring at me like I was the villain in all of this. As they left, my sister said, "Don't expect me to be there for you when you realize you've made a mistake." When the door finally closed, my girlfriend turned to me, visibly shaken. She told me she couldn't stay here anymore, not with my family acting like this. She said she needed to go somewhere safe, somewhere she'd be supported, and I couldn't argue with her. That night, we decided together that she would go stay with her parents in her hometown while I sorted things out here. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. I need to wrap up my life here, cut ties with my toxic family, and move to her city so we can start fresh together. We also made another big decision. We're getting married. It won't be a big wedding, just a small ceremony with a few close friends and her family. My younger sister will be the only person from my side invited. She's been incredibly supportive through all of this, and I know I can count on her to respect our boundaries. As for my parents and older sister, they're done. I've changed the locks, installed a security system, and blocked their numbers. They've shown me exactly where their priorities lie, and I refuse to let them poison my future. Third story. A coworker sent her naked pic to me, followed by an apology. So I reported her to HR to protect myself. I'm 32M, the general manager for a corporate franchise breakfast restaurant. It's basically only me and management in-house. I have 2 kitchen managers, but they are more lead cooks than anything. I do all the scheduling, hearing firing, disciplinary stuff, etc. It is corporate owned, so I have a regional director, and there is an HR department at the head office. One of my kitchen employees, 40s F, just sent me a picture of her boobies, followed by an apology, and saying she won't be coming in tomorrow. What do I do from here? I'm thinking obviously I call HR Monday morning and report this through them. What do I do beyond that? How do I protect myself fully in this situation? Relevant comments. Hennessy_Carter. It may have been a genuine accident. I've sent people messages meant for others on accident before. These things happen. I would report it to HR immediately, but you do need to ascertain whether it was an accident or not. OP, almost certainly an accident. Yeah, no sort of inclination of interest otherwise. And she seemed embarrassed into calling out for tomorrow. I don't see the play otherwise. OP responds to some ideas of keeping personal and work message apps separate. OP, you bring up a very valid point, and you may have just solved 2 issues for me. I have a hard time leaving my employees' text messages on read. I tell them I'm always easy to reach and prefer texts because my service gets choppy sometimes, and I can filter how urgent it is. But it does get draining being accosted on my days off all the time. A separate messaging service could solve both these issues. Keep the work messages separate, and not feel so bad about waiting till I'm back at the office to answer non-urgent stuff, and avoid this kind of mix-up in the future. There are no accidental naked footage in the work messaging app excuse. Update. 5 days later. Hello fellow managers. I made a post a few days ago asking for advice about having received a picture from an employee of her topless, followed by an apology. I got a lot of great responses. Most people saying what I was thinking. Cover yourself and report to HR. A lot of people suggesting I let it go and do nothing besides let the employee know I knew it was an accident and delete it. And then a handful of people who didn't understand why anyone would report that, saying I was a bad person for even thinking it. And a bunch of questions and comments about the boobs themselves, asking to see them, if they were nice, etc. You know, pretty much par for the course on the internets. I felt like I should update you guys. I ended up emailing HR the next morning, letting them know what happened and asking for advice. This was a Sunday morning. I also sent a text to my HR rep, letting them know I had sent them an email. HR got back to me soon after. The gist of the email they sent me was, you should meet with the employee in question, with a witness, and let them know of the possible consequences of their actions. Tell them about the risks of sending pictures like that out onto the internet. Remind them that they last forever, and that once they are out there, they have no choice over what happens to those pictures, as well as the possible repercussions to the person receiving them if someone else, like a partner or a boss, sees those pictures in someone's device. Let them know you are putting a disciplinary notice in their file to iterate the severity of their action. And let them know that there will be consequences if there is a recurrence in the future. In an effort to preserve the integrity of the employee to her colleagues, and in an attempt to alleviate some of the embarrassment of the situation, I didn't want to loop in one of the kitchen managers into the situation, besides the fact that they are both male. So I arranged for my HR rep to come down and meet her with me on the first shift back after her weekend. My HR rep is also female, which I feel like was more appropriate than to meet her with another man. I asked HR to meet me at a cafe across the street, just to avoid any questions from staff or any chance of being overheard. There isn't a lot of space in my tiny office for 3 people, and I didn't want to sit in the dining room and chance being overheard or the employee feeling more embarrassed than needed. The employee was admittedly embarrassed, but was very receptive and appreciative of the way we handled it. She was convinced I was letting her go. We reiterated that we were not, just crossing the T's and dotting the I's. I couldn't not report this, but I also didn't want to loop in anyone she has to work with. Hence HR is here. I showed her my phone, reassured her it was deleted right away, not shown to anyone. But that being corporate, I had no choice but to have what happened on paper. She had no issues signing her warning. All in all, it was a good way to bury the hatchet and eliminate the awkwardness. And I feel much better knowing the situation is entirely above board. I think everyone sleeps better tonight because of the way it was handled. But let me tell you, I lost a lot of sleep about it the last few nights. I imagine she must have as well. Thanks everyone. Keep it classy. Relevant comments. OP explains how HR works in his workplace. OP, that's how HR works, but you don't just tell the staff, hey, you did this, warning you not to do it again, sign here. You have to walk them through the action, the policy they broke by committing it, the reason that policy is in place, the immediate repercussions of their action, the possible risks of said action, and the repercussions of recurrence. Example, if someone is late, you don't just tell them, hey, you were late. Here is a piece of paper that says you were late, sign it. Instead, you highlight the attendance policy they agreed to, highlight the day and time of their breach of said policy, the impact that had on their teammates and the enterprise as a whole, the consequences of continuing this behavior, and a time and date to meet again to make sure the policy is being met. Commenter 1. I love the measures you took to prevent embarrassing her and to preserve the relationship. Commenter 2. I have to say, I think you handled this perfectly. I love how you took steps to make sure she was more comfortable and not embarrassed and met at another place to preserve her dignity. This is an example of exactly how these situations should be handled. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.